everyone! Nandito na naman tayo sa JEC 112 na klase natin in Readings in Philippine History. So we are already in the week 9. So our topic is all about the role of Islam in the history of Filipino people. So ano daw yung role ng Islam sa history ng Pilipinas? And according to Cesar Abib Majol, or Mahol, how do you read that? Learning objectives natin, recall the historical background of Muslims. People in the Philippines, describe the development of Islam in the southern part of the Philippines, characterize unique historiography of Islam in the Philippines, and contrast Muslim historiography from the usual church-oriented writing history. So facts demonstrated that Islam influences from Borneo and Sulu. So dyan talaga nang galing, di ba? We're beginning to shed root in Luzon. The first half of the 16th century. Not long after Islam was being strengthened in Mindanao from Sulu as well as from Moluccas. So the spread of Islam in Malaysian archipelago is needed a legitimate field inquiry, such as common phenomenon must not be looked at as mere spread of few theological principles or religious belief and ritual made possible by handful enthusiastic missionaries. So the spread of Islam had presented an interplay of political, economic, and psychological and social causes and factors together in their ideological concomitants. Furthermore, the attractive characteristic of Islam as such, as well as its ability to satisfy new needs brought about by rapid economic changes due to the nature of the international trade at that time, must also be considered. So first stage natin. So the first stage represents the conception of Malaysia as a constellation of sultanates, dyan talaga nang galing sa kanila, principalities, exemplifying different stages of Islamization. It covers the period from the end of 13th century to the end of 15th century, yung first stage natin. This stage portrayed sultan, port kings, minor chieftains, dyan naman galing sa kanila, and participating in various decrees, intensities in international trade from Red Sea to China. Trade is under control of Muslim traders, principally Arab, Indians, Persians. Many Malaysian ports serve as sources of articles of trade and as clearinghouses. A more direct participation of Sulu in this international trade can be traced the arrival of Arab traders around the end of 9th century or the beginning of the 10th century. So dito talaga nanggaling yung traders natin, can be traced here. Okay? Not long after they were outside from China trade in 878, during the Tiang's dynasty, after a prohibitive policy China against the Arab Muslims, so may nangyari pala doon, there's this ousted sila, Muslim traders, Kala in the Malay Archipelago become for some time the last port to call to them. So ito pala yung naging last port nila. So however, due to the persistent demand for Chinese products in Arabs' lands, either for domestic use or exportation of other lands in the Mediterranean, the Arab traders made efforts to get China's product. So they made efforts to China's product. It was then that they learned or discovered new route starting from Borneo, then passing through Sulu, Palawan, Luzon, up to Formosa and the south of Japan, where Chinese products were available. Doon sa mga route na to. Sulu at Japan. So route. Even after the middle of the 10th century, the Song dynasty naman in the 10th century, when the Muslim traders were allowed once more to frequently ports of South China, and the old route to the coast Indochina began to utilize again. The new route was still used since the traders become acquainted either new products or better sources of old products. However, it is clear that the use of this new or second route does not necessarily imply Islamization of the Borneo. So this use of product pala hindi siya yung start talaga ng Islamization of Borneo and Sulu. It is only suggested that the presence of Muslim traders in Sulu and therefore its more direct participation in the international trade. Sulu had started to become a clearinghouse for products which is intrepid sailors brought from the more outlying islands. So here the following are important phases of the first stage. The coming of Sulu Arab traders. Second is the increase of participation of Chinese traders in the Sulu trade. Third is the coming of Sumatran Islamic influences and political institutions during the end of 14th century. Sulu's official contract with Celestial Throne, at least tributes were sent. Establishment of Sultanate in Sulu around the middle and 15th century under Sheikh Abu Bakr, an Arab who had traveled extensively in Malaysia. Also, the coming of Islam to the Cotabato Basin and its consequent spread to the Lanao, dito nangyari yon sa Cotabato nag-start, are during the end of 15th century. So, dito pala, yung sa Lanao pala, ito pala yung naging start. This significant in the Mindanao Tarsillas by coming of Sheikh Muhammad Kabungsuan, an Arab Malay from Malaya, as well as couple of Arab predecessors claimed to have been also sheriff, and which one returned to Sumatra. Also, the increase of Islamic influence in Sulu, Mindanao through greater maritime contacts with Malacca, Java, Borneo, and occasional visits of Muslim traders and missionaries from Arab and Indian islands. The second stage naman tayo ng Islamization dito sa country natin. The second stage represents the coming of Western European imperialization. So dito na the second stage na yung pagdating ng Western European imperialization. And of the Arab or Muslim monopoly of international trade in Southeast Asia as consequences of coming of the Portuguese and the defeat of Arab fleets in Socotra on 1507, Dio, 1513, etc. The Portuguese Spaniards came in the 16th century not only to extend possession of sovereign but to spread Catholicism. Okay? In the same manner that they had the consciousness of coming from Christian lands and had religious mission, the Muslim and Malaysia had consciousness of their Islamic faith, of the integrity of their old Islam. It would be a fallacy to maintain that on account of the different stages of Islamization in the various parts of Malaysia, there was no such conception. Actually, by this time, Islam was well rooted in Aceh, what we call Aceh or Aceh, Malacca, part of Java, Brunei, and Sulu. From a very important point of view, Islam constituted the only ideology that resisted the combated Western imperialism and colonialism and Christianity. Early Portuguese and Spaniards authors had looked at their arrivals. So next is, what are the important phases in the second stage that can be summarized as follows? One is the coming of the Portuguese under disruption of Muslim international trade control. Second is the coming of Christian religious and economic threat brought about a deliberate attempts at Islamic missionary activities and the uncommitted parts of Malaysia who were either Hindu, pagan, etc. The rise of Brunei as a commercial power, its dynastic alliances with Sulu, and its greater participation in the trade of the Philippine archipelago. Also here, by the last quarter of 16th century, there began a greater consolidation of the possessions of the Sulu Sultan from northeastern part of Borneo, parts of Zamboanga, including the islands of Tagima, Basilan, Tawi-Tawi. Well, at the same time, consolidation of sultanates in Maguindanao and Buayan began. Also, the fall of Manila as a Muslim principality in 1517, a Spanish attack on Brunei in 1578 and 1581, and first attack on Sulu in 1578. Treaty between Sulu Sultan and Spaniard on, take note of this, on June 14, 1578. The conflicts between Spaniard and Maguindanaos in 1579, 1590, etc. Also, this Spanish expedition to the Moluccas on 1982, 1585, 1593, and 1602. The expedition can be interpreted not only as an attempt to check Dutch ambitions in the area or to extend Spanish territory, but also to attempts to isolate Muslims in the Philippines archipelago and cut off sources of human and material aid to them from Moluccas. Conversely, the temporary neutralization of Magindanaons was sought to facilitate conquest of Moluccas. Also, we have here the third stage. The third stage represents the gradual fragmentation of Malaysian Darul Islam under the spheres of different colonial powers. So the following phases are important. One is the contest for the control of Luzon and the Visayas between Spaniards and the Muslims. Second is the decline of the Sultanate of Buayan around 1619 in favor of the Maguindanao Sultanate under the redoubtable Sultan Dipatuan Kudarat, whose powers extended up to Maranao regions. Also third, the Spanish conquest on the Moluccas in 1606 cut off to the Muslim of the Philippines from the farther south. We have also the fourth, the system of divide and the role of Western colonial powers, sultanates and principalities made to fight each others. We also have expedition of Governor General Conquera to Mindanao on 1637 and Sulu in 1638. Lanao expedition also in 16. Take note of this in the Lanao expedition 1639. The inability of Sulu to expand or extract tribute from up north led it took further westward in the island of Borneo for its tributary expansion. The fourth stage refers to the attempt of the Zulus to regain part of their former glory during the 18th century and the 19th century. Around 1700s, where the dynastic quarrels between Maguindanaon and Sulu tried to exercise more dominion over the Cotabato and Zamboanga regions. Here are the important salient events that happened. First is the modest resumption of Sulu trade with China, initiated during the reign of Sultan Sahabuddin around 1700s, or Badandin its missions to China in 1726-1727. Attempts of Baharuddin the First for peaceful commercial relations with Manila. Treaty happened on December 19, 1726. Also, the so-called piratical raids during the time the earlier can be interpreted as a source of income to make up for the loss of participation in international trade and the former trade with China. The difference of character and role of the two brothers of Azim Buadin in 1737 to 1740 and Muiz Abdin, the former believed that he could keep his throne and help Sulu with friendly relations with Spain and by the granting of concession of Spaniards. So his attempt at commercial relations with China, his tribute to China in 1743. On the other hand, believed that such independence could be maintained by the closer relations with English, could be considered a sources material against persistent Spaniard domination. Also, lastly, the relative peaceful relations between Sulu and the Spains from reign of Sultan Muhammad Israel and Sultan Sharifuddin. Modest commercial prosperity for Sulu. Here is also the stage for the decline of sultanates. The decline already manifested earlier becomes more manifested rapid by the middle of 19th century. So here are the few significant events as follows in this declination. First is the commercial ambition of the English, exemplified the cession of Balambagan and the first cession of the North Borneo territories of the South Sultan to them on 1760s. Also, the Spanish use of steam war vessels in 1848 enabled them to gradually gain mastery of the Sulu Sea. Also, the Spanish expedition of Indabao in 1848. So, dito nagkameron ng Spanish expedition sa Davao. And Oyanguren versus the Suludato of Bagu. The visit of James Brooke, he is the British consul general at Borneo, the governor of Labuan, to Sulu in 1849. The Spanish fear and reaction to the ambition of British and French, as well as persistent of piratical raids culminated in the Spanish expedition against Sulu and the capture of Hulu in 1851 under the leadership of Governor General Orbis Tondo. Treaty with Sulu on April 30, 1851. The Spanish expedition of 1876 capture of Sulu and also the rise of Juramintados or the significance such as event is that organized resistance under the Sultan had failed. Responsibility for the integrity of Darul Islam had become an individual one. Change of official Spanish policy, meaning the transformation of Muslim rather in the Philippines archipelago into loyal Spanish subjects rather than converting them into Catholicism. So also in 1885 protocol between Great Britain, Spanish and Germany agreed that Sulu belonged to the Spanish sphere of sovereignty on 1885 protocol. The 1891 Wheeler Campaign in Cotabato. Also, we have here the Philippine Revolution and the American occupation. Here it happened, first is the leader of the revolution considered the Muslims of the South of Filipino bound with them by racial ties, ancient historical relations, and geographical propinquity. Next is the Bates Treaty with the Sultan in 1899, also the defeat of sporadic rising against American occupation, and the futility of the battles of Badju and Bagsak. Sultan Jamalul Kiram, formal abdication of political power in 1915, or known as Carpenter's Agreement. It is a Muslim representation in the Philippine government. The role of the Moro resistance against Japanese occupation, also here. The independence of the Philippines on July 4, 1946, all Filipino Muslims with rights of citizenship. So anyone with some acquaintance with the history events in the Sulu and Mindanao will easily notice the incomplete character of the above outline. Actually, there has been no intention comprehensively. So with such a background, it is impossible to appreciate the result of the impact of Islam on such indigenous elements. For example, Jura Mindato, upsurged in 1880s, cannot be fully understood except with the knowledge of the Sultan's failure to prevent non-Muslim power from controlling land asserted to have been part of Darul Islam. Moreover, the dynastic relation between the different sultans in Mindanao and their claims to rule, the exact and tribute are to some extent based on the appeal to Islamic laws and traditions. The history of the Muslim in the Philippine South and the lives of their sultan are not devoid of an epic character. Of course, a great deal of cruelty, tears, and suffering have followed the wake of their depredation, and persistent struggle against aims to conquer them is not denied. But these are merely responses to similar implications upon them. In all life and death struggles, no contestant has a monopoly of virtue or vice. Yet the few had observed in invariant bravery, stoicism in defeat, and in general, magnanimity in the moment of Muslim victory. So here's our source. You can watch the actual video in this readings. And of course, we have this video analysis. You can watch here on YouTube. And here's the link it is. Or you may scan the QR code using your iPhones. Just follow this link. Okay? So thank you. Just study it. I think that this is already our final topic. So study hard and God bless you.